Welcome to the InfoMullet YouTube channel. If you enjoy this content, please like or share. And if you'd like to support the InfoMullet by becoming a mulleteer, visit us on Patreon. We appreciate your support. This question of stimulus, right? And I don't like the name stimulus. I use it because everyone else uses it. It's not really stimulus when you have a pandemic, right? The pandemic is like a meteorite hitting the country. It's like a foreign army invading. These are exogenous events that there's not a real moral hazard like there was in the financial collapse that you had banks acting badly and that led to bad things, but stimulus is the name of it. And the first round of stimulus, the CARES Act, put in place a lot of provisions which are expiring. There was a one-time check for $1,200 to people. There was a $600 a week add-on for unemployment. These are largely, the $1,200 check was a one-time check. The unemployment is expiring here at the end of the month. And obviously the pandemic is surging again because we didn't get our stuff together. So there's a lot of discussion on where is the second stimulus round at and what does it mean. So first of all, from a media literacy standpoint, if you're looking at politics, the two sources I use a lot of sources, but the two ones I use are Politico and The Hill, and I use them for different purposes. The Hill is where I go for like committee level reporting of what's going on that week or that day, very tactical. Who's got what in the bill, who's horse trading with who, what's going on in the committee meeting. The Hill is very good for that, thehill.com. Politico, I use for a little bit broader view. What's the political trends? What's some of the policy discussions going on or the strategy? And so you can read both of those and get a pretty good feel as the stimulus bill comes forward. The Politico will tell you like where the parties are lining up. The Hill will tell you when the committee meeting is and what happened in it. And so what happened was after the CARES Act was passed, the Democrats in the House passed something called the HEROES Act, because all bills have to have names like CARE and Hero and Apple Pie, but I shouldn't blame all parties do that, right? It's always the orphan and anyways, bills get named, all sorts of great stuff. But the HEROES Act was passed in May, and the Democrat, and that was only passed in the House, the Senate hasn't passed it yet, that proposed another $1,200 check to anyone making $75,000 or under, phasing out at $90,000. The GOP has countered that, and remember, Senate is in recess right now. The House and the Senate are in recess, or the House may not be in recess. The Senate is recess because they're not in because of this pandemic and normal summer recess. They're coming back in next week. So the GOP is countering now from a stimulus check. It looks like there will be some sort of stimulus check, but the difference is the GOP is saying rather than 75,000 and under, they want it to be 40,000 and under. So there seems to be some consensus on that as a concept, but difference on where it falls. Tyler, Mulleteer Tyler, our great investigator of the failures of RT.live, had pointed out this thing called the vacation tax credit. And I chased that down. What this was a lead turd of a policy balloon floated in mid-June that instead of a stimulus, there would be a tax credit called the Exploring America tax credit, that if you traveled the country, the money you spent traveling on the country could be used as a tax credit that would then be used in place of stimulus. That thing went down faster than the Titanic because it was just, tax credits are at the end of the year. They're complicated. They tend to benefit the wealthy more. Not a lot of appetite. It was pretty much DOA. So it looks like they're going now for the stimulus check that was like in the CARES. You get a check, although it may not be signed by Trump this time. There's a bit of a kerfuffle going on between Senator Schumer and the White House about who signs what and what signatures there. But anyways, there will be a check. It'll be $1,200. What matters is how much you make. If you're 75,000 under, you'll probably fall under the Democratic plan. 40,000 under the GOP. Unemployment. The unemployment. Where there's consensus, there seems to be consensus on the duration of unemployment. Most states go to 26 weeks unemployment, but often there's a federal emergency that will kick that up to 39 weeks. There seems to be consensus between Republicans and Democrats to have federal support to extend unemployment through that extra time. Where they differ dramatically is that the federal addition, it was currently $600 a week federal addition to the unemployment. That's being said, the GOP is saying that's a no-go. They don't want to have unemployment benefits any higher than 100% of the pre-unemployment wage rate that someone had as a federal addition. And without these extender benefits, without these $600 federal, you're looking, if nothing gets done, so this one's this is a little more hot potato than the stimulus check. If this doesn't get passed, unemployment will drop from where it is now to an average of 333 a week, with a low of about 101 in Oklahoma, with a high of about 531 in Massachusetts. Again, states vary widely in how much they provide unemployment, and it's also based off your previous wage, but there are often caps that are far lower than what your previous wage was. So if the Republicans say, well, we're willing to add federal money, but only up to your wage cap, they may help in some states where the unemployment is artificially low, getting you up to your wage rate, but it's not going to get you above your wage rate. And I think that's the really hot point of contention. The GOP is also trying to limit this to about $1 trillion. So, I mean, that's a big number. So it's not nothing, but that's a smaller than the HEROES Act. And they've also thrown in some of their things now that are going to become negotiating points. They want liability protections for business and hospitals, except gross negligence. If there was gross negligence, it doesn't apply. But general liability protections for COVID-19 related lawsuits from 2019, so going back in the way back time, through 2024. So they want to cover a liability protection. They want to put in $75 billion for schools and universities to absorb the cost of reopening. That's not new. That was in the HEROES Act by the Democrats as well. They're also looking at extending a second round of payroll protection plan. This is the PPP that was designed for small businesses and probably did a large degree to help keep some businesses afloat, but it was also exploited by large companies that sort of fell within this, 500 employees. So right now what they're looking at is reducing the employment rate so that it really is targeted for smaller businesses. Full disclosure, I use the PPP for my business, so there's my bias. It wasn't easy. They're also looking about $150 billion for states. Again, we've talked about that states, even before COVID-19, were not in good shape from a standpoint of their unemployment pension or their unemployment and their pension fundings, and they're really being hurt by that. Both the Democrat and the GOP are looking at some money for states. It's a difference of how much and to what extent. But that looks like that will be negotiated here in the next week or two as we get into and this will be the big thing. I think school reopening, if I were to make a forecast of the next 4 weeks, Congress is not going to want to touch forcing schools to reopen. These cases are going to increase. They're going to do it. We're going to have those initial ones. And they're going to probably not want to touch that because nobody likes their kids being threatened. I don't care, blue, red, whatever. If you perceive your kid being threatened, it's bad. They're going to focus on the second round stimulus, which means we're going to see a lot of news back and forth. Yeah, Jules has this great comment that the Explore America is a tax credit for spreading the pandemic. What could go wrong? That's a good point. Adam's asking, shouldn't federal government send stimulus to the state's government rather than directly to the people? That's generally, there's two schools of thought on that, but when you think about a multiple propensity to consume or a marginal multiplier rate, that's the rate of which if I send you $1, how many dollars will that spur in the economy? So that's a number that economists use to judge the efficiency of things like stimulus or whatever, the business investment. It's used in all sorts of as a measure, but it's basically saying if you had an MPC of 5, I think it is, and maybe that acronym is wrong, but it's your multiplier. That means if I pay you $1, that $1 will act as $5 as it ripples throughout the economy. And that multiplier is higher for direct people getting their checks than it is giving it to the state. Because unless you add a lot of riders to the state can just absorb it in the budget. It can use it to shore up shortfalls. And so generally what an economic policy is, and I'm not going to get in the argument of whether multipliers are good or bad, because there's a valid debate of whether those numbers are even right. But I think right now we'll just say that they're using that measure. But I think the preferred policy approach is to fund states with what they want states to use goes to directly in state support for things like the pension and shoring up the unemployment and doing things like infrastructure project, kind of like the 2010 stimulus bill put a lot of money into the states for shovel-ready projects. That was a disaster, but second order effect discussion. But stimulus, direct stimulus, they send the check directly to people. And when you're talking about a pandemic, one of these externalities where there's a hole, I describe it as a hole and you're shoveling to fill the hole, and not in the economic sense of we're paying people to dig holes and fill them. That's a different analogy and wrong. It's more like you're sending this money out so that people can eat, they can consume, they can provide, they can pay rent. It's to help with those things, and that keeps things going, because what you don't want is the economy to seize, because so many people are unemployed, so many things. We're in a risk of so much different factors causing the economy to seize more than it has, and then restarting it will be very difficult. Thanks for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to follow the InfoMullet, visit us on Facebook or Twitter. And if you'd like notifications when we post new video content, click on the red subscribe button below the video. If you've ever wanted to become a mulleteer and support the Info Mullet, visit us on Patreon. We appreciate the support.